Welcome, everyone, to a Canadian Patriot podcast where Cynthia and I are joined today with Jeff Brown, our good friend and host of a variety of things, especially the China Rising Radio Sinoland podcast, the China Tech News Flash. Jeff is the author of multiple books, which are all available on his site. There's going to be a link in the description box. But most importantly, the reason why we were really happy to have Jeff on today, with everything going on right now, in terms of what's going on in Ukraine, that's in everybody's field of vision, being bombarded 24/7 with a lot of misinformation. There's a lot to unpack that deals with something that is often overlooked. And Jeff is the co-founder of the Bioweapons Truth Commission and the curator of the global online library associated with that commission. He's done an enormous amount of work on the issue of biowarfare, historic and as well, obviously, in the present. So who better to have on and to just talk a little bit about this important topic but Jeff. So Jeff, thank you for coming on today.
Well, thank you, and I'm not blowing smoke up your all's backsides. I really do admire and respect the work you all do. It's really impressive, and you all do stuff I just can't do, and so you all just to be able to talk with you, with the two of you, is a humble honor for me. So thank you, Rev.
Jeff, and I think we all have talents to bring to a symphony, and that's what's so great. We all have an instrument to play, and I think overall there's a higher unifying theme that we're all aiming at, which involves a just world that we believe is possible. We are committed to morally, and that's why we like you so much, Jeff. You're just consistent. And one thing about your recent video, we were just watching the other day, your recent production, a very short video, but still a good comprehensive overview of something regarding the U.S. bioweapons labs. Russia invaded Ukraine. I mean, I'm using the same language here, but Russia militarily intervened finally after years and years of provocations on their border. Obviously, NATO has been encroaching increasingly with the intention of wrapping a program of full spectrum dominance around Russia's perimeter. China's facing the same thing in its own backyard. Finally, after setting so many red lines in place, offering so many chances of diplomatic escape,
Unreal.
They decided, okay, enough is enough. It's obviously going in one direction, and they basically brought a lot of the shadow creatures to the surface by simply saying we're going to denazify, we're going to demilitarize. And a big part of that campaign involved also attacks on certain areas that are host areas within Ukraine to Pentagon, Department of Defense, DARPA, bioweapons connected laboratories. I was hoping you could say, well, what is this? What are these?
Well, this, first off, the hardest part about bioweapons for Westerners is denial. And one of the reasons that we started the Bioweapon Truth Commission and some fabulous people involved is that it is such an important aspect of Western imperial history. And we actually start back in World War I with chemical weapons, because it was the French and then the Germans and then the British. And then after the Germans were conquered, then the French and the British, who were using massive amounts of chemical weapons, even during the Russian Revolution against Lenin and company. Then we jump to the 1930s and the Japanese with Unit 731 in Harbin. And they experimented with biological weapons on. They killed somewhere between 200 and 300,000 Chinese between 1937 and 1945, dropping ceramic and expandable bombs full of insects, full of anthrax and Black Plague and everything you can think of, as far south as Ningbo, which is just north of Shanghai. Harbin is up on the Russian border. They also, and what was so horrific is and I'm sorry about but until you understand the history, at least a brief resume of the history, it's difficult to conceive that the West would do something like this for now over 100 years. Then when the Japanese got surrendered to the Chinese in 1945, the Americans took the top echelon of Unit 731, which were doing vivisection, horrific crimes against humanity. I mean, unbelievable, poisoning, hundreds of thousands of people, biological, bacterial production, etc. Instead of sending those guys to the International Criminal Court, the United States kept them. The United States took all the leadership of Unit 731, and including Ishi Shiro, the brains behind the whole operation, 8,000 microscope slides of tissues, etc., thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of and photographs, spirited them off to the United States, to Fort Detrick in Maryland, which is the biggest weapon of mass destruction bioweapon laboratory in the world, along with the UK's Porton Down. And so a few of the Japanese did get tried. The lower echelon people in Unit 731 did get tried in Khabarovsk. There was a trial in 1950, and 15 or 20 of them got tried and hung or long prison sentences by the Soviets. But they basically, the United States took the Unit 731 playbook and just kept going. And then in 1950, right after 1949, so from 1945 to 1950, the United States was using the Japanese scientists to basically develop Fort Detrick into the world's most important biological weapons of mass destruction place. And it's right outside of Washington, D.C. The CDC, the NIH, and Fort Detrick are all right next to each other. I wonder why. And that's not a coincidence, because they're all military. And so then in 1950, the Korean War. And so the United States was getting their clocks cleaned by those pesky commies, and so they got desperate. And so in 51 and 52, the United States took the Unit 731, the technology they had, and the evidence is overwhelming that the United States used biological warfare on the Chinese and the North Koreans. And that's one of the reasons we started the Bioweapon Truth Commission, as when Godfrey Roberts actually found Joseph Needham's International Scientific Commission report on the North Korean on the U.S. bioweapon use, and that kind of got us going. And it's available for free on the website. And so ever since then, the United States has not stopped, to the point that all during the 50s, 60s, 70s, a gentleman named Leonard A. Cole, a military officer. I mean, this is not some, pinko sympathizer. He wrote a book, Clouds of Secrecy, and he documented the United States experimenting on 800,000 of its own citizens in the United States using bioweapons.
Is this in regards to things like Tuskegee, or is this other?
Well, Tuskegee was syphilis.
Yeah.
Was I don't know. We're talking chemical. We're talking biological weapons, dispersing them over cities, in metros, over San Francisco. No, we're talking bio arms on their own citizens, and then. So China, because of the Korean experience, they knew what to do when they were hit with bioweapons. And so when COVID came out, they were ready. And of course, whether people out there want to disagree with me, we know it's an absolute slam dunk. It is also a bioweapon. And it was planted in China in hopes of crippling it. But the Chinese were so good at doing what they do, they went into war mode with COVID, and whether you disagree with them or not, they feel like they have to contain COVID and any other outbreak because they have to assume that it's the United States trying to attack them. All during 2017 and 2020, massive numbers of swine flu and avian flu outbreaks all over China. There were documented evidence of drones flying over farms and dropping packets of bacteria and viruses on farms all over China. Mm-hmm. So they know what's going on. The United States has never stopped. They also attacked Cuba with insects. There's a book called. I want to make sure I get it right. Oh yeah, six-legged soldiers that he talks about how at least 10 or 12 times the United States has flown insects, pests that kill crops and eat crops and infect animals.
Just quickly, I wanted to add, because we read the Daliana report from 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Which we'll also include in the description box. But she had a Pentagon report where she was saying the Pentagon actually said how to kill, something like 630,000 people for like the lowest price. And they had calculated that with this particular insect infestation, one insect could kill a person for 29 cents a cost.
There you go. Bean counters.
Not even for an enemy, right? Not even for an enemy. It's just like to reduce numbers.
So all the problems with what was it? Not was it Ebola? Anyway, hundreds of Cubans were infected. I think it may have been Ebola, and then all these exotic diseases that have never shown up in North America or South America. They're all from Africa and Asia. All of a sudden, Cuba's getting them left and right. And there's a book on the China Rise on the Bioweapon Truth Commission. Look up Ariel Alonso Perez. He's he donated his book in English to the Bioweapon Truth Commission called Biological Warfare on Cuba, and it's for free. It's a PDF. You can download it. He documents the whole thing. So it is so hard for Westerners to accept this. These are war crimes, and these are grotesque crimes against humanity. But what I call the big lie propaganda machine is so powerful, and they deflect this on their enemies. I just saw a video where people, Americans in the Ukraine at the embassy are blaming Russia for the biological warfare centers that were in the Ukraine. I hope the Russians have destroyed them by now. The U.S. weapons of mass destruction, biological warfare. There's at least 13 of them in the Ukraine.
Yeah.
And so we don't stop. They have centers across Africa. They have a center in the Philippines. And why these countries allow this to happen, and they all tend to be concentrated, around Russia and around China, as well as Africa.
Mm-hmm. And I want to just add for the audience too, because there's so much information in all of this, and we as well didn't know very much, and we just read up basically, your work and also Daliana's article, and that was already quite a bit of information. But it was interesting to note that it's against international law to use biomedical weapons, but the United States is apparently not a part of that. So for anyone who thinks that this is all very exaggerated and dramatized, I would ask them, why is the United States not legally beholden to not using biological weapons if they don't intend on using biological weapons?
The United States was one of the key founding signatories of the Biological Weapons Convention with the United Nations. But the United States doesn't respect any law.
Well, I think that's the thing, right? Like the act that Francis Boyle helped draft, or maybe he was the lead author from 1972. The U.S. did sign on to that, but they just abrogate completely all of that, and consistently for the past 50 years. But then there's the other thing that Diliana pointed out, which was this other Articles of Rome statute in the International Criminal Court on biological weapons and experiments as war crimes. That's what they chose not to participate in. Just to clarify for people listening and who might be a bit confused, the U.S. did not participate in that at all.
And I would just point out. Go ahead, Matt. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. You brought up the Chinese, how concerned that they've been, and it's true. Like, we've been following the Chinese response since the very earliest stages of this whole pandemic, and very early on, we had the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson who was already sending out articles by Larry Romanov warning that had been published, I believe, on Global Research for 2 years ago, just warning about the targeted gene warfare that had been already openly used and talked about by the United States, even in the Project for a New American Century document. And I got a little
The PNAC says biowarfare. I wrote an article. We probably both wrote an article about it. Said that biowarfare is a valid opportunity to destroy our enemies.
I literally have a quote. The quote I have here from it is the Rebuilding American Defenses by people like Crystal and Wolfowitz. Combat will likely take place. This is the year 2000. Combat will likely take place in new dimensions, in space, cyberspace, and perhaps the world of microbes. Advanced forms of biological warfare that can target specific genotypes may transform biological warfare from the realm of terror to a politically useful tool.
Yeah, love it. You gotta like it.
They're just so open.
I know. Well, and they're so open. I want people to know, because I've had actually people contact me and say, Jeff, but that can't be true, because I saw on Snopes that there are no American biolabs in Ukraine, and so I was able to get from the U.S. Embassy website in Kiev. They actually have a whole section on, quote, biological, I forget what they call it, biological development or whatever. And it's this Orwellian doublespeak. It's just unbelievable. But they're researching hantavirus and avian flu and swine flu, in one of the most productive agricultural areas in the world. And so before they scrubbed the website, 14 PDF documents were downloaded and showed and lists all of the bioweapon laboratories in Ukraine that were on the American Embassy website. So if anybody wants to tell me that this is not true, all you have to do, I mean, one of the problems with the global online library with the Bioweapon Truth Commission is so vast. Where do you start? Mm-hmm. And it's just it's the largest collection in the world, but just doing a little research, and Dilyana Gaitanjeva, she's just amazing. And I just got a link today where she has done more research showing evidence. I don't know how she gets this stuff, official documents. She's an incredible investigative journalist who takes her life into her own hands, mm-hmm. In Georgia and Ukraine. Yeah, did you all know that the biggest bioweapon lab in Georgia is called the Richard Lugar Biological Research Center? Richard Lugar was a U.S. senator from Indiana, I think it was. I mean, it's so obvious. So anyway, they scrubbed those 13 or 14 documents off of the U.S. Embassy, and I'm going to post them tomorrow.
That's good, because before our interview, I just did a little Google search just on biolabs Ukraine, just to prepare the mind a little bit for our chat, and yet page after page, only fact checkers have jumped on this thing, trying to convince everybody to turn their minds off. There's nothing to see here. Go back to sleep. And the amount of effort that they're putting in to try to brush it away when the evidence is completely to the contrary. Thank you for putting that on your
I will tomorrow. I will tomorrow. And
I think it's important for people to know, like, why are all of these biological labs in these certain areas of the world? Because I know, again, reading up on this last night, that for instance, the Georgia situation, there's a special contract. Because these biolabs don't, they're sort of like a private company entity, so that Congress can't hold them accountable. But the United States also has a special agreement with the Georgian government so that these private companies have diplomatic immunity, so that they can do whatever they want, and they again fall out of another loophole of legalities. I mean, honestly.
They subcontract to these American Western companies who are, basically, they're war criminals. They have sold their souls to the devil, and the Georgians and the Ukrainians have no say whatsoever what goes on in those labs. People around Dilyana has, and I'll spell her name out, Dilyana. You can find her on my website, and just Google Dilyana, and she's just done some amazing work. But she and I interviewed her a long time ago, and we've stayed in touch. The people around these labs die. The local populations die. The laboratories in Sierra Leone and Liberia, where they're developing Zika and Ebola. Ebola is patented by the U.S. military. Zika is patented by the Rockefeller Foundation. Lyme disease was created on Plum Island in New York, by, DARPA. I mean, this is what they do. This is what they do. And so Ebola breaks out. Are you trying to tell me that they just happen to have an Ebola breakout, in Sierra Leone and Liberia? No, they're testing it. They're tweaking it and testing it.
And that's where their biolabs are too.
It happens right around the biolabs in Sierra Leone and Liberia, and I think it's Guinea-Bissau. There's 3 countries in West Africa. That's where all the Zika, HIV, all that was developed there. H1N1, all these bugs are bioweapons. They're all are, and they do it to drive vaccine sales, and they do it to try to harm countries like Iran and China and Russia. We, the ICC should be, charging, Europe and European leaders and and North American leaders with war crimes, with bioweapons. But again, the big lie propaganda machine is so darn effective. I mean, it's like a tsunami, and it just brainwashes the world. And they're really good at this. Bernaysian, you all are big fans of Edward Bernays, like me. Not fans, but we know who he was. And it's this Bernaysian mass hysteria, and this Bernaysian mass psychology is just so frighteningly effective. And people are just intellectually lazy. Oh, Snopes said there's no bioweapon labs in Ukraine. Honey, pass the salt, please. That's it. What are we having for dinner tomorrow?
What I find so interesting psychologically in this whole thing is that the way they justify these unjustifiable, insane acts in terms of just creating countless different variants in laboratories of different types of diseases that they then patent. How do they justify that? Well, their argument on one level is for the completely naive, where they'll say, oh, but anything could evolve in nature, so we have to be ready for anything, and so we have to produce everything to prepare us for, let's say, we need to make a vaccine, so we can only make a vaccine if we already have everything.
By the way, that's the exact same logic they use for nuclear deterrent.
I was gonna bring that up. Yeah, exactly. The enemy can always produce some bioweapon against us, so we have to be prepared by making even more bioweapons that might be produced maybe in hypothetical computer models that can go on infinitely. And like you just said, yeah, that's exactly what drove the insanity of the entire Cold War and buildup of nuclear weapons, was the idea that, and you wrote about this, Cynthia, so eloquently over the last few months, is the idea that the Soviet Union may possibly in some scenarios build all of these other nuclear bombs, so we should do even more of that. And it's all computer modelers. There's no bearing in reality anywhere, but people fall for it because they're in this psychological fear state, right? That's the whole Freudian.
Well, they're everybody's brainwashed. I call it behind the Great Western Firewall. I find a taxi driver. I lived and worked with the Chinese for 16 years, and I find a Chinese waitress or a Chinese taxi driver much more informed about world events and world affairs and geopolitics than some liberal guy who got a BA and whatever at a university in the United States. I mean, I have become so disenchanted with with the leftists and liberals and these cardboard progressives, and they're the worst. They're the worst. And anyway, I know it's hard to do, but for the fans out there, just go to bioweapontruth.com. I've got hundreds of articles and stuff that I can't even find the time to upload and update it, but it's already so massive. It's like, it's just cherries on the cake. But COVID, I need to add a bunch more stuff. And James Bradley and I are doing this JB West and JB East present See You in the Hague because of COVID. And so COVID, it was before this it was H1N1, and before this it was Lyme disease, and before this it was Zika, and before this it was Ebola, and before this it was whatever. It's just the latest. It's just the latest, bioweapon produced by the United States, and Porton Down is also heavily involved in the UK. So
which was involved with the Skripal.
Well, of course. Well, they got poisoned just a kilometer away.
Yeah. It's always...
What a coincidence.
Maybe also, I don't know if I maybe understood you correctly, but in your video, when you're talking about the bioweapon labs in Ukraine, did you mention that they're also dumping toxic waste?
the European Union has used Ukraine since they got their quote independence in 1990. They have used Ukraine as a dumping ground for banned and expired chemicals, pesticides, herbicides, etc. And I put the link in there. There are an estimated 4,000 toxic depots of chemicals. I mean, it's like Love Canal. Remember Love Canal in New York? It's like Love Canal 4,000 times.
Wow.
And banned banned chemicals and that got banned in the EU. They just trucked them and trained them down to Ukraine. And so all those billionaire plutocrats, that disdain their Ukrainian people, they just dumped them, wherever they could. So now, not only are there, well, I think obviously the Russians are going to get rid of these darn these 13, 14, whatever biological and I always want to say weapons of mass destruction, because bioweapons are weapons of mass destruction. And so I hope they get rid of them. Unfortunately, there's about 8 of them to the west of Kiev. So I don't know what they're going to do about those, or will they use precision missiles to take them out.
Well, I mean, the thing that Cynthia and I were concerned about is, just talking about, well, if they do target, how do you dismantle a bioweapons laboratory safely? Because it seems to me that if you just go and blow it up, knowing the type of activity inside of it, that's probably not always the best idea.
I know, that's the problem. Well, you would almost need to just go in and just use just basically drop napalm on it, and just burn it to the ground with napalm. That's the only I can think of to kill all the viruses. But I suspect what they will do is they will at least go into some of them and see what the heck's going on. And of course, the Russians have biological, level 4 biological labs, and so they'll have the experts to go in and know how to handle this stuff. So I'm sure at least the ones that they can get their hands on, the ones that ringed, eastern, the ones that ringed, eastern Ukraine, I'm sure they will go in and just tear those things apart and see what they can find. But why don't the Russians maybe do a display of this and show it at the UN? They should.
Well, I think that would be the most logical next step after they can bring some stability to the situation, is to start really doing an educational process in the UN and wherever else to really bring light to the nature of these different Nazi traditions on so many levels that have been deployed and infest not just Ukraine, but really the entire Western world. And I mean, we've all read the reports, and we know the stories of the second, third generation neo-Nazi groups in Ukraine. We know the story of the Nazi stay-behinds of Operation Gladio under the CIA and MI6 and NATO in the 1950s and beyond. We know a lot about these things. You just brought up another dimension to this regarding the Japanese fascist biological warfare divisions absorbed into the U.S. military-industrial complex. That's another component. People think about the Mengele thing being absorbed, but they don't think about the Japanese aspect. That's another dimension to this whole thing. But this has to be really, I think, brought to the surface finally.
Something's got to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something's got to happen. Well, that's all I can do is do what I'm doing and writing and reporting, and you all are writing and reporting, and I've got the biological, we've got the global online library, and there's a couple of people the biological weapon deniers for Korea, that we basically just destroyed their arguments and their flimsy, tenditious, evidence, which was a fake and obviously faked. And so we have done some good, and over 50,000 people have accessed the library. So thousands. So it has done some. It has been. It is something that I take some humble pride in, and something that I can smile about as I take my last breath.
Definitely, yeah. In schools, universities, researchers, there's all sorts of nonlinear effects with that type of resource you've created. So we're going to make sure that that link is there available so everyone can access that library in the description to this video. And yeah, I think you've done a very good thing by putting that together, Jeff. I mean, that's a vital resource. And if anybody wants to buy your books, wants to subscribe to your podcast, make a donation, help your workout, because you're entirely people funded, that is all very easily accessible in the link on your website, which we will also include. I highly encourage people to do that. And
my
so,
16 years in China. Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff, for taking the time and elucidating some important mysteries for people that I think need to be made clear in the mind, so that we know what the terms of the historic game is and what to do to get out of this fire, which is something that can be done, but we really have to know how to navigate through misinformation.
And it has not stopped. I mean, America is the leader. Porton Down's just kind of the tail on the dog in Britain, but it has not stopped. And the United States is the weapon of mass destruction. Well, not World War I, but since World War II, the United States is the King Kong of WMD, bioweapon development. And as I said in my article, it's estimated that the American taxpayers have spent $100 billion in the last 75 years developing creatures to wipe out humanity. So it's we got to keep after it. So you guys are doing a wonderful job. I love getting your all Substack stuff, and I love getting your articles, and so keep up the good work, and we always stay in touch.
Absolutely, Jeff. All right.
And if France will let my wife and me come back to the United States, because right now with the what I call the Nazi pass, the vaccine, I call it the Nazi pass. We can't get back into, even Florence can't, because she does not have an American passport. So she would have to be vaccinated to get into the U.S. I could use my American passport to get into the U.S. But even with our French passports, I'm a dual national. Even with our French passports, the French right now would force us to get the mRNA injections to come back to the United States. And we want to go back to see our first grandchild in June, who's being born in June in Oklahoma. And I'd love to come up and visit you all in Montreal, but again, maybe the Canadians would force us to get injected. I don't know.
Oh, most certainly, yeah.
We'll meet at Niagara Falls.
Yeah, we'll shout across the border. Yeah, right. All right. Well, hopefully the great game does change, and I think it is changing, as we speak and as we live. So who knows what the next year holds and beyond. But I think that everything that we have known and have been comfortable with for the past decades is going to change very drastically, either for very, very good or very, very bad. We don't know, but it's going to change. So we'll see. All right.
Thanks a lot. Send me the video, and I will definitely blast it out to my section of my section of the world.
Yes, sir.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.